coordinates, but they are in a certain distance from these coordinates. How did they know where to put the barrel? And is that done by like a tablet or a program, or do they actually use some measuring devices on a paper, on a map? I have no idea how this works. You can put it in the comments, educate me, educate an infantryman how artillery works.
Да, то по нам прилетів
Yeah, the
ланцет.
Lancets.
Їхній ударний безпілотний апарат. Ми працювали на одній з наших позицій вогневих. Маневрував, то намагався він влучити якраз в БК, яке знаходиться в кузові. Ну, трохи не попав, ну так от посікло, там дуги, ось тут на склі він теж є. Сюди подолітало.
Oh, they got really lucky. Didn't exactly hit. If they're not dead, it didn't hit. They're really, really lucky. Okay, so we saw some equipment there, and I have no idea how it works, honestly, but I'm assuming nowadays they don't really do the math and the coordinates calculations on paper or on their own. I think the tablet would do everything for them, but again, I don't know.
Для гармати, де потрібно, це вже самі по ситуації вирішуємо, хто де стоїть, ну, будь-де. Відпрацювали по 2,36 гіацинт, гаубиця. Відпрацювали чітко, кажуть, є ушкодження, все добре.
It's an artillery duel. Every time Russian uses their artillery, Ukrainians know their positions, they can pinpoint them like that. Russians have the same ability. And then it's about who is faster and who moves around. So if the Russians don't move their artillery pieces after firing, Ukrainians will get the positions, will put out the drones, and will shoot and confirm destroy it. The Russians will do the same thing for Ukrainians. So they move around all the time, trying to pinpoint each other's locations, and trying to be faster and quicker and shoot first. That's an artillery duel.
Пілот скидає відео, пошкодження, оцінюємо які. Стрілять ще раз чи ні?
Finally, we will watch another video, and this comes from Belgorod, and it ties into what I was saying before, that Russians are expecting an attack from Belgorod. They don't have a huge amount of reserves there, and Russian population there is worried.
Мы, жители фронтового Белгорода, обращаемся к нашей власти. Наш город и область давно перестали быть защищенными. Ежедневно белгородцы терпят обстрелы со стороны ВСУ. Наши сограждане гибнут, наши объекты критической инфраструктуры разрушаются. Мы в полной мере осознаем, что в преддверии наступления ВСУшников наши войска не помогут в полной мере защитить. Ведь линия фронта огромная. Без нареканий и упреков мы просим нашего губернатора Гладкова Вячеслава Владимировича, а также управление МВД по городу Белгород выделить нам стрелковую...
They're afraid that Ukrainians will strike into Belgorod with ground forces. This paranoia is exactly where Ukraine wants the Russian army. Again, Russian people will follow this paranoia. Again, they will feel it, and that's not good for Ukraine because it mobilizes Russian people against the Ukrainian army, which we see here. That's the bad part of it. But if a Russian army is paranoid like that, it's good. Ukrainian goal would be to get the Russian army to move their forces north. That weakens the southern front.
оружие для защиты родного города. Мы обычные жители. Мы не профессиональные военные, но наш патриотизм и сила русского духа позволят нам удержать город от наступления ВСУ. И хохлы смогли удержать Киев, когда им дали автоматы. Точно так же и мы сможем удержать.
Oholz managed to hold Kiev. He's giving credit to the Oholz, the Ukrainians. No, it's of course offending them. It's a very bad word to use for Ukrainians. These guys are incredibly brainwashed. They're probably far right, and they're aggressive. They are very dangerous, and if Ukraine would really want to take Belgorod, I would say it would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, if you have this mindset in the city. But it just saddens me to see that Russian propaganda has worked. It's very sad to see. It is not Putin, it is not Shoigu, it's also the Russian people. You see this right here. They have decided to be blind about this conflict.
Белгород, если вы дадите нам оружие, мы готовы стать народной дружиной, которая будет оборонять мир и покой Белгорода от происходящих сил ВСУ. Вячеслав Владимирович, услышьте нас и дайте нам оружие. Мы покажем нашу силу. Враг не произведет, победа будет за нами.
On May 20th, 21 drones were shot to Kiev, of which 20 were shot down and one connected. I woke up to explosions and air alerts. I panicked, I put on my clothes. I went to the elevator, which was very stupid because during an air alert in a high-rise building, you're not supposed to use the elevators and you get stuck in them. But fortunately, I made it down. And what do I see downstairs? A bar. Huge explosions going on outside around the city. Then a bar, and Estonians drinking at the bars. Like, Chill, brother. Let's go outside, see the explosions. I was afraid, so I went to the shelter, but they went outside to enjoy the fireworks. Anti-air missiles exploding. One of the missiles exploded over our hotel. The explosions reminded me of 120mm explosions. Big blasts. But let's begin from the beginning. Yes, I went to Ukraine again, and this time the trip was extremely different than in February. I went again with Ragnar Saisen 69th Sniffing Brigade to deliver trucks to the armed forces of Ukraine. We began at 6 a.m. from Tallinn. We drove a lot. The trip was about 30 hours drive. Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, then the checkpoint to Ukraine through Lviv to Kiev. And the closer you get to Kiev, the more you start to see the signs of war, destroyed buildings at the side of roads, block points, sandbags, soldiers. I was driving with my friend Jasper from Estonia. We reached Kiev. Sun was shining, it was incredibly beautiful. I cannot describe how beautiful is Kiev. And what do we decide to do first in this beautiful historic city? Yes, you guessed it, the Toilet Museum. Of course we want to go to the Toilet Museum because where else can you find it? Unfortunately, we didn't get to go. But speaking of weird museums Kiev has, I spotted the Jellyfish Museum also. In the next day morning, we started giving away the trucks in the Kiev Fortress. We were allowed to bring all of the trucks. There were, I think, 13 of them. And we had many different units come in and take the trucks. I'm not gonna name the units. Some of you might recognize them, some of you might not. It's not important here. They were all very thankful because they're in deficit. They all need trucks. They need more than what we can give. After that, we got loaded into a bus. We drove out Kiev. Then we got loaded into a military van, a military truck, and we drove 1 hour even further into a top secret location. And then I cannot tell what we really did or who we met. It is all under a very big secrecy. Then they gave us all weapons and we fired away. We got to fire a lot of rounds. I really enjoyed it. Full auto, single, all positions. It was so awesome. They didn't even allow us to take out phones for a moment. Nobody could touch their phones, so I couldn't shoot any. On the next day, we woke up and we went to Hostomel. I've already been there, but it was still very cool. There was the Mria, the biggest plane in the world. Ragnar Saisen is organizing the entire thing. They're under 69th Brigade of NAFO. Their links are in the description below. And then at night, after coming back from Hostomel, I chilled with operator Starsky for like 5 hours. We listened to some street performers. The dude is awesome, honestly. And then Ragnar came, the leader of the entire operation. We made a video together because now Ragnar is making a project with Starsky. I fell in love with the city. Kiev, my favorite city in the world right now, and I want to go back as soon as possible. And I will end my story with the shelter experience I had when I ran down to the shelter. There was no one because everybody was enjoying the explosions outside, but there was this dog, shelter dog Smetana, which means sour cream in English. A small Smetana came and she was so friendly, always wanted to cuddle, so I spent some time with Smetana there. Now you're part of my trip. But now, my friends, I will give you the Patreon names. I'll butcher the names. When I was away, I think we have some weird names coming in, so let's see. If you like my channel, Patreon is the best way to support, and it ensures I can continue doing these videos if I get demonetized by YouTube, which happens. Kosta Madsen, Göran Hallström, perfect, this is the names I want. Kari Griffin, Aldai, Greg Dragon. Thank you for these patrons from the bottom of my heart. You're helping my life to get more easy. I also have Twitter, where you get the most important news about the Ukrainian war 3 times a day. Also, Instagram, where I post all of the photos and videos about this trip when they happened. Links in the description below. And as always, my friends, thank you for coming back and thank you for watching my videos. You give a lot of meaning to my life. Until my next video, Slava Ukraini.
HIMARS, the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. You have been hearing about it for almost a year now, because it became Ukraine's MVP against Russia's invasion. How it reached that status, though, might not be obvious. After all, the A stands for artillery, and you can find artillery basically everywhere. But HIMARS is different, and its potential successor in Ukraine threatens to upend the slowdown in the war. That's why, in today's video, I wanted to take a brief look at the history of HIMARS, its key features, Ukraine's HIMARS strategy and how Russia has tried to counter it, the still untapped potential of HIMARS, how a new entrant to the battlefield called Storm Shadow may fill in that gap, and why Russia is uniquely vulnerable to the system, despite its still restricted implementation. Oh, and I guess we'll have a cameo from Pythagoras. Hope you like geometry? But we start with the history of HIMARS. The reason that many people had never heard of HIMARS before the war is because the system is relatively new. Its main forebearer is the MLRS, or Multiple Launch Rocket System, which takes some of the same armaments as HIMARS. The MLRS is hardy but slow. You can tell by how it has a track system, like a tank would. That is because it was designed in the 1970s for a long, drawn-out slugfest with the Soviet Union. But as the Cold War drew to a close, the Department of Defense speculated that the future of US conflicts would center around short, rapid deployments. In that regard, the MLRS was lacking. It is clunky and uses enormous and expensive C-5 Galaxy planes as transport. Essentially, the US Army demanded a sleeker, downsized version of the MLRS. The American experience in the Gulf War validated this belief, and so HIMARS got the full green light. The first tests occurred just months later at the White Sands Missile Range. However, research and development do not occur overnight. Lockheed Martin received the main contract for prototypes in 1996, with the Army and Marines receiving evaluation models in 2001 and 2003, respectively. If you check your calendars, you will see that this pushed operational deployment past the start dates of US major combat operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. The United States has not been involved in large-scale ground deployments since then, which is why it likely evaded public awareness. That is fitting, because HIMARS is generally good at evasion, but we'll get to that. Nevertheless, HIMARS got plenty of reps fighting insurgencies in Afghanistan and Iraq, and had some bonus deployments to Syria. But its spotlight would have to wait a few more years for Ukraine. So why is HIMARS so powerful? Let's talk about a major problem that traditional artillery has. The issue is heft. Unlike small arms fire, when you launch, you risk lighting yourself up like a Christmas tree. That goes double when you are firing rockets and kicking up all sorts of dust. If you are not careful, opposing artillery might fire back at you. HIMARS has two defenses against this. The first is range. There are two main armaments that HIMARS uses. The first is GMLRS, or the Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System. The second has the fantastic nickname of ATACMS, or the Army Tactical Missile System. They are very different on the range spectrum. As a reference point, let's use Kherson, back under Ukrainian control since November 2022. GMLRS have a range of